I was thinking today that I have changed my views on what is important in a relationship and what we need to do to make that a healthy relationship and to survive for a good length of time. So my first relationship, my first marriage, I was 20, and I remember with my husband and I, we weren't actually together very long before our first child came along. And he had a sister who had been married for quite some time compared to us, obviously. And she and her husband often used to do things on their own. I'd hear that he would have gone to an office party or something by himself. She might have gone out with her friends and he'd stayed at home with the children. The reasoning behind it was probably because rather than pay a babysitter, they could each go to events where there were people that they knew, that they could enjoy their company. So that obviously worked for them. But at the time I thought it was a bit strange that you would go to a party or an event by yourself, because I was young and I envisaged that my husband and I, if we had any invitations to anything, we would go together. So I thought that was a bit of a strange thing to do. I don't know why, I just did. I figured married couples did everything together. And those attitudes have changed quite a bit for me over the years. Now, I've been married 3 times. This one is the keeper. I know that. And I've made my mistakes in previous relationships, in my expectations, and in others' expectations of me. Now, my second husband was the direct opposite to my first husband. At the beginning, he seemed to be a nice guy. He was good to me, good to the children, but those attitudes changed over time, and he became more and more possessive and more insistent that things were done his way. And that became increasingly more difficult because his demands became unreasonable. He didn't like me doing anything on my own, ever. And when we went out, he insisted we used to dress similarly in some ways. If I wore blue jeans, he wore blue jeans. If I came out wearing black jeans, he'd go and change into black jeans. He controlled who were my friends, where I went, what I did, and that quickly became very suffocating. And he would time how long I would be at each event. As an example, I lived in a small place called Live-In, and I had a job interview at a place called Palmerston North, which was half an hour's drive away, and the interview was at 9 o'clock. Now, while I was there, I thought I'd go and see his auntie, who was elderly, and go and have a cup of tea and a bit of a natter and just touch base with her, see how she was doing. And then, because Live-In didn't have many shops and certainly didn't have any op shops of note, I went and looked around some of the second-hand shops and op shops just for fun, because I had the time. I didn't have anything pressing to get back to. So I went op shopping and just generally enjoyed being out and about, just pootling along, just doing things that amused me. I got back to Live-In, where I was living at the time, and he had a shop. And I came in the back door of the shop and he shouted down the length of the shop, "Where the F have you been?" And I recoiled in surprise, A, about his attitude, his anger, and B, he knew where I'd gone. I'd gone to a job interview, and I said as much. And he said, "Well, the job interview was at 9 o'clock, an hour for a job interview, that's 10, drive back here at 10:30. Why have you come home at 2 o'clock? And I had to give him a blow-by-blow of everything that I had done. And that was a clear warning sign that he was going to control my life, and he did for many years. Moving along to when my husband and I got together, this is my husband, who is my current and future and always will be my husband. He had not lived with anybody before we moved in together, and his freedom of movement, his ability to do things that interest him and that he wants to do, is very important to him, and I've grown to understand that more and more, and to appreciate that while I need to give him his space, he will certainly give me mine. So it's a win-win. I don't monitor his activities, he doesn't monitor mine. We can do things independently, but we definitely make the effort to do things together as well. And it's a much healthier way to do things. And we both have opportunities, social opportunities, that don't include the other. My husband is very introverted and enjoys his own company, likes to go on long walks, which I used to join him in, but I can't do that at the moment, and maybe never will get to a time where I will regain enough strength, confidence and mobility to be able to join him on his 4 to 6 hour walks. But we will find a way that we can do some walks together. It's about changing attitudes and altering your expectations of yourself so that you can live a life that's full but maybe is changed in some way to make room to be able to do something but in a modified fashion so that you can still do something and enjoy it without pushing yourself beyond what limits you may have for whatever reason. Also, when it came to any kind of social events, I would have in the past expected that both of us would attend. But these days, because I have my own interests and he doesn't really know people that I play cards with, that I go to the pool with, that I play bowls with, he's very introverted and his comfort level is not high when thrown amongst a group of people he doesn't know. And so we've basically agreed that unless it's really important, he doesn't need to come to social events associated with my chosen activities. And for me, I would rather he said that he wasn't comfortable than he feel that he has to come along, and I'd spend the whole evening worrying that he wasn't comfortable and checking in with him and seeing whether he was comfortable to remain or whether he stays home and he's comfortable being at home and I'm comfortable with doing that. In our daily life, there are things that have changed quite markedly from when I was living with my children. In fact, I used to have clear and firm ideas of how things should be done. Not long after getting together, my daughter in particular said to him, "Aid, has Mum given you the towel folding tutorial yet?" And he said, "What?" And she said, "The towel folding tutorial. Mum's very fussy about how her towels are folded." She would sit down in front of us and we would each have a towel and she would show us exactly how each towel was to be folded. And it wasn't acceptable to be folded any other way than Mum's way. And he said, "No, I don't think so." I said, "Well, yes, I did try to show him how I like these things done. But after a while I realised that as long as he was doing it, it was helpful and I didn't need to be so pedantic. And if the towel folding wasn't to my liking, I may every now and again go to the towels in the linen cupboard and rearrange them myself and refold them." So decided that wasn't anything that I needed to enforce upon him my way of folding towels. Another thing that they noticed was that we have a draining board next to the sink, as you often do in a house, and my children noted that things were left to dry on the draining board. Again, they said, "How can you get away with that? Mum was always very insistent. When we did the dishes, we washed them, dried them and put them away." And he just shrugged his shoulders and looked at me and I said, "Well, he's not my child. I can't really require him to do things. I have to fit in with the way he's used to being. And if it bothers me draining on the draining board, then I'll probably go and do it myself." I think as we age, we learn from our mistakes. We learn as life goes along what is important and what isn't. Now, recently, my son said to me, I had always given my children either a present or money for their birthdays, and he was very grateful for some money that I gave him for his birthday, but pointed out to me that he was now in his 40s and he didn't really need Mum giving him money. And he was quite happy for me not to have to give him a present. And that surprised me. He's a very independent guy and he has his own family, but I didn't realise that. But hearing from him that he didn't need a present pulled me up short a little bit. I've always tried to be really fair with my children. I see my granddaughters much more frequently than I see my grandsons. And so when I do see them, or when I can, I might feel that I'd like to go out and treat them and buy them lunch or do something with them. And my daughter and I have always done things for her birthday, and I've not been able to do that with my son for some years. So I was giving him money for his birthday so that he could treat himself to something, because we all have our budgets and I wanted him to have something from me. But he's told me that I don't need to do that anymore and I need to respect that, but it will feel funny not giving him anything when I probably will at least do something with my daughter for her birthday. So As time marches on and my Parkinson's progresses, I notice things for myself. I notice that I have more trouble finding words, more trouble remembering things, and physically it's difficult to know how much is Parkinson's, how much is referred pain and discomfort from my operation on my back. But I'm having to self-assess quite frequently what I can and can't do. If I haven't slept very well, I know that I would be wise not to drive the next day. I have to listen to my body, I have to listen to my husband when we're looking at options for us to get out and about and things that may be a trip hazard and may end up with me falling. And it makes me feel like a frail old lady sometimes, that I and my husband have to go and take note of the surface that I'm walking on, the slopes, the gravel, anything that could cause a fall. And it makes me feel like an old lady. It makes me feel cosseted. That's a good word. And I don't like feeling like I am a frail elderly woman, and I'm probably not at that stage, but too much emphasis on my ability to walk on certain surfaces does make me feel like I may be viewed as a frail old lady, and I don't really like that very much. While I've been recovering from my various operations, my husband has certainly stepped up to the plate and is still doing quite a few more things around the house than I do. I still have to be quite careful with how I use my energy, how much I do jobs that involve too much bending, because I can feel quite uncomfortable, quite sore if I overdo things. And I do feel a little bit guilty when I have to go and rest in between things and my husband's still out there doing the garden, mowing the lawns, doing all things. He's certainly no couch potato. And I have to accept that his energy levels, his ability to mobilise, his strength in his legs and his body in general is much more than mine will ever be, I'm sure. And I find that hard to accept, that he is able to do these things and doesn't seem to need to stop very often to rest. He'll just keep going and going and going like the ever-ready bunny, and then at the end of doing quite a large piece of work compared to me, he will rest at the end of it and maybe have a coffee and something to eat with me. But I have to stop, start, and protect my back so that I can continue to do some work out in the garden, but not to the point where I make myself really uncomfortable. So I feel like I'm in a constant state of going to do things, thinking about how I do them, whether it's wise for me to do them in the first place, how much time I spend on it, and self-analysing all along the way. It's not a natural thing anymore that I can think, I'll go out and do this and this in the garden. It might be deadheading the roses, it might be pulling some weeds, it might be thinning out something that I've planted. I may have this mental list, but the list might take some time to complete, unlike my husband, who's able to do things for much longer. So yes, attitudes change over time, and with the introduction of Parkinson's into our lives, they are likely to change even more in the future. And I'm sure it will be a process of negotiation between us, what that might look like. When I have increasing needs, whether my husband is able to support me, maybe he can support me with some things, but if my needs get more than he can handle and he needs to have the space and time to do the things that are important to him, then we'll need to negotiate and look into supports, practical supports that can assist me and can free my husband up so that he doesn't become my carer, at least not too soon. So yes, my attitudes have changed over time. They've changed as a result of my previous marriages. They've changed as a result of my becoming more mature and understanding that I don't have to have my husband do everything with me, and he doesn't need to have me doing everything with him either. That we are adults, that we can make our own choices as long as there's nothing harmful to us or others or harming our relationship. That it's important that we have our own space and time, and that we nurture that now and have an awareness that we need to have that space and time, even when I progress, to have a healthy marriage and a healthy life for us as a couple and for us as individuals. How have your attitudes changed to what a relationship looks like? And what feels healthy for you? Have you changed from what you would have expected from a relationship previously? Do you look at each other differently? Is one more independent than the other? Does one depend heavily upon the other? For me, it's important that my husband has his space, his ability to do things that fill up his bucket, that help him to live a healthy life, mentally and physically. And this is a far different kind of relationship to my first relationship, where I expected, as a young woman getting married at 18, having her first child at 20, I expected that if you're in a marriage relationship or any other relationship that's full-time, that I would have expected that we did everything together. But maturity and experience and being in a relationship, as in my second marriage, where I was required to have certain things that I had to do, that I was required to do everything with him. I was required even to dress similarly to my second husband. That my choice and how I lived my life was severely curtailed by a domineering, controlling man, and I hope never to be in that position again. So yes, my attitudes have changed, and I think they've changed to make me a healthier me, to make our marriage a healthier marriage, and our future to be a healthier future for the two of us as individuals and as a couple. So just some thoughts on how attitudes can change over time and why they might change. They might change because of changing health, changing mobility, or just a realisation that what worked for us perhaps as a 20-year-old in a relationship doesn't work so well for a 64-year-old with life experience and health issues. This has been Sue for Parkies and me, my journey with Parkinson's. Kia kaha, be brave, be strong, be you.